Welcome to the Moms I Know with Sheila Walsh-Denton and Maria Anderson-Farner. Two moms on a mission to reclaim childhood and take you from surviving to thriving on your parenting journey.
We must go beyond textbooks, go out into the bypaths and untrodden depths of the wilderness, and travel and explore and tell the world the glories of our journey. By John Hope Franklin. Hi, this is Sheila.
And this is Maria.
And we want to welcome you to the Moms I Know.
Moms I Know. Hi, today we're going to be talking about traveling with children. And I've been doing a lot of traveling lately and observing lots and lots of families. Of course, I've been with my own family and watching the way that the kids handle all of the travel, but also watching the families out in the world at airports, on trains, in cars, at resorts, on the beaches, and all over the place. And watching the families that are really successful at traveling, and then watching the inevitable meltdowns that happen and how we handle those. And so it's been really fun to think about this topic. So excited.
Yeah, I love this topic when you suggested it, because that's something, when Brent and I, my husband and I, we met on an adventure trip. We met when we were 3-week backpacking trip in Mexico, Belize, and Guatemala. And it was, we weren't even like together, but we were like, oh, when we have families, we want to do this adventuring, because we saw those families when we were doing this, and it was inspiring. And we knew that if we had children, that's what we were going to do.
It's such an incredible way to explore and to educate. And so I really feel that traveling, and I know people who, once they have children, they stop traveling and they say, oh, it's so much more difficult to do this with children. And of course, it can be. And then there's going to be the things that come up as well. But if with just a little bit of planning and foresight, not only can it be incredibly successful, it can be such a portal to the world in terms of education. I think that, the travel that we've done with our children has just opened them up to the world, and they see the possibilities, they see the different cultures, they explore and they learn. And so looking at that quote, I really feel that does just open up these doorways. And so it's really fun to see that.
Yeah. And it really, the unexpected inevitably always happens. A couple years ago, we were over Thanksgiving, we did a canoe trip on what's called Black Canyon, which is right below the Hoover Dam. And the water goes up, which we knew about, but we didn't realize it went up so much. And in the middle of the night, we lost our raft, we lost our food, we lost everything. But we were okay, so it was a mishap of mishaps. And we realized that, number one, we're all okay. And number two, look at this. We have a day, because it was on Thanksgiving, that no boats were coming in and out. And so we couldn't contact anybody. And so we spent the day in a hot spring, and we ended up having, we had 1 can of beans and a few granola bars. We weren't starving. And it was just they will never forget that Thanksgiving. And okay, we made that through, and what the mistakes and what we learned of, don't take anything for granted. And, it was a fun experience, a little bit nerve-wracking, but hey, and in our family, as you know, we do have a few more stories like that. The adventure was a little bit higher than expected, but that's the piece of, the unexpected, and we're resilient.
And how appropriate, Thanksgiving. Your children will never forget that, and they will be so grateful for the things that they do have.
Right.
It's those stories that in the moment, they're a little bit scary or a little bit wild, and then after the fact, those are the stories that the kids love to bring up when all those things go wrong.
Right. Yeah. No, I just gotta, yeah. No, I was going to say, yeah, it was funny. The next day we got rescued, and we get down to the dock, and there's our cooler that went all the way down the river. And the food was fine. And so we had all our food. It floated all the way down. Our raft was down there. Our kayak was down there. Yeah. So it was just so funny.
Right. But you had that experience with your family, and that's all that matters, and everybody was safe. So yeah, fun. I think about those. We had, trips when I was a kid, and the things that happened that we never forget. And then of course our own children have so many of those stories. And so it's really great to see that. I met a man years ago at a homeschool conference, and it's the husband and wife, the Jeffries, and they've written a book called Adventuring with Children. And one of the things that they talk about in that book is that the children got them into situations that would have never unfolded if they were just a couple traveling. They got invited into private homes. They got invited to different celebrations because they had twin boys, and that was so unique. And even just children, we have friends that have a daughter, and even just the one daughter, they would tell the same story. People would open up their doors when it's a family traveling versus just a couple traveling or a single person traveling. So getting them into situations that were incredible and adventures that they had, and then also getting them out of situations that could be really dicey. And they had a story about being on a bus in Morocco, and there was some conflict, and because they were a family, they were let off, and off they went, and they were safe. And so I think that sometimes we think about the dangers that might arise, or the hassles or the challenges that are going to be there with traveling with children, but we don't often think about the benefit of what is going to unfold as we're families traveling throughout the country or the world. So it's really nice to see that. And it's a great, great book, Adventuring with Children. I really enjoy
I think the Jeffries have actually written a few books on adventuring with their children. And I got a few of those when my kids were young, because it's always been a dream and a goal of ours. And, we really feel that we have, and like your family, it was part of our homeschool journey, the homeschool trips and everything. And really getting out there and exploring. One question I see a lot on a lot of groups is, what age do you start? What age is it okay to bring children? And really, I think you can bring them, I'm not like, you have to like international travel versus like travel a few hours away or whatever like that. But, we were bringing our children camping at 5 weeks old. 5 weeks to 6 weeks old. So I don't really think that should be a limitation for you to get out there and adventure, because I think in those early years, especially, in the before a year old, it's almost easier because the baby is attached to you, right, in a carrier, and the baby is sleeping with you most likely, in the tent and stuff like that. So it's really doable.
So that whole concept of baby wearing can be really great when we're traveling. I think that, I waited till they were a little bit older just to have that period of time of rest and really honoring the mom and the baby and that little, cocoon time. But by, I think 5-6 months, we were traveling. And actually we did travel when our son was younger, and that wasn't so great. So I think I've come on a slightly different, more cautious stage at this point, waiting a little bit longer. And then also in terms of flying, definitely taking other things into account about, that type of exposure to the planes and the crowds and all of that, but definitely, adventuring out in your local area and then growing and also what you're used to. And so, we're going to be, people are listening from all different sort of walks of life, and a trip across the state can be huge for one family, whereas a trip across the world is what another couple might have been doing already. And so that whole range of what are you comfortable with, but then just stepping outside of our comfort zone a little bit. And the children, especially when they're young and they get used to it. My daughter and her husband would travel with their children when they were very, very young, and they just really got used to that car travel and, staring out the windows. And I think that we did too as children. And so I think it's breaking them into it gently. You start with small trips, and then you can get longer and longer and longer. And so we're looking at different, whether it's a hiking trip or a car trip or a plane trip or a boat trip or river trips, and, all the different types of travel that we can do.
Yeah, there's different, there's different ages. For example, like those first few trips, were where we were just breastfeeding, and we'd stop every hour to breastfeed and stuff like that, and making that doable. When they were like 2 and 3 years old, we did road trip down to Baja, and like made one day from Central Coast, we went one day to San Diego, and then went down to Baja camping. And then we did that at 3 and 4. And if you know me, there's an adventure story to go along with that one that involves a car being staying down in Baja. And so since then we've just flown to Mexico.
I remember that story though.
Yeah, that's quite an adventurous story. And so there's different, like you said, if you start them early, people were like, how did you do that? How, because we didn't have our DVDs or anything like that in the car. They were used to that setup, and maybe that could be a good segue into what did we do? How did we have those successful car trips?
I think we did one. It was a 12-hour car trip to Salt Lake City, I think, when our son was 6 months old. And you have to look at it differently. And one of the things I love to help people understand is that people have been traveling throughout history with their children, whether they were strapped to their chest or in, the little backpack or in, horse and buggy or whatever. And children adapt to that, and they're used to that as long as they're with their families and off they go. So, we don't need to be shy about that. And then there's the different modes of travel. But yeah, we were talking earlier about just what were some of the tips and tricks that make traveling with children much more successful. And so I'd love to hear some of your thoughts, and then I'll share some.
So some of the things that we did was making sure that we stopped frequently. When you have small kids, you just have to be open to that there's people getting car sick, there's people getting bored, there's meltdowns, sort of things. So what do? You make sure, and I'm talking now like older than baby, probably toddler sort of thing, that, when every rest area we would stop and we'd have a ball and we'd run around or we'd play with the ball sort of thing, making sure you have some physical, you're able to move around. We also made sure that we always had a snack bag, making sure that you don't have to stop for food, that you had that food inside readily available. And so you're talking, kind of your comfort food, things that are easy. The other thing that was really good was, as they got even older than toddler, but stories on tape. We just had, with Audible now, you're able to have so many resources, but we would, start with pirate stories, Shakespeare stories, princess stories, all these different stories, little stories on tape that our kids just loved.
So, we have very similar things just in terms of that, the food is key, and always having healthy snacks for them. Avoiding the high sugar things, because then you just see this spike in the energy and then the crash. And so just, lots of nutritious food, definitely stopping. So I think it comes down to this sort of planning ahead. And I know your family is so good about planning ahead, especially for your long trips, your river trips, that kind of thing. But when we plan ahead, when we allot enough time so that we're not stressed out about trying to get to a place in a certain amount of time and just let the journey unfold, I think that's really, really key. I also wanted to mention rhythm, keeping the family rhythm going. And so when we can work around the meal times, the nap times, especially if it's a car trip, and take advantage of that, and then not pushing beyond their normal rhythms. So getting to a place, and if it's an extended day trip, getting to a place, letting them have that exercise, then having the dinner, the story, the bath, the bedtimes, keeping that family rhythm, I think can really help with the long trips. Keeping the sleep as close to the pattern as possible, keeping the meals as close to that pattern as possible. And for us, we also did, it was a little longer ago, but we did the old-fashioned car games, the license plate game, the cow games, all those old-fashioned things about I Spy. And I'm a firm believer in car time being that time where you stare out the window and you're bored and you get to engage your imagination. You get to observe what's going on in the world, looking at the different crops that are being grown. If you're going through agricultural areas, if you're in the cities, looking at the different architecture. I mean, there's so many different things. We can be asking our children all kinds of things. We can be telling them stories about our trips when we were kids. And so that whole idea of the old-fashioned car games, the stories, and reading them books. If one of us can read while we're driving, I was always usually the passenger and my husband was the driver, and I could read if I was in the front seat. So reading stories. And then we also did the audiobooks, but also this concept of, especially with the toddlers, the little ones, the busy hands equals busy minds. And so I would always have a bag of just objects, and I would just be, you pull out a comb for a little while and then that gets, dropped. And then you pull out the wiki sticks, the little wax pipe cleaners, and then those get, and so like each new item, and if they're things that the kids haven't seen for a while, they're pretty engaged. This can be even the older baby through the toddler years. Those can be really handy. Music and singing, we went through, lots of different children's tapes, lots of different songs. We also used to sing the musicals, so singing from a lot of the old fashioned musicals. And so just keeping it engaging, keeping it fun. And then, of course, I remember the times when it's like I was done singing or talking or this and that. And then it's like, okay, this is time when we're all just going to stare out the windows for a while.
Yeah, no, exactly. We would do, the ABC game, finding something that starts with A, B, C, and then we'd do card bingo. And one of the funniest games was the outhouse game. That every time you found an outhouse, you'd shout out and you'd count.
That's big points.
Yeah, when you see the outhouse.
Yeah.
And I love that, busy hands, these are things for the airplane rides sometimes is, I made my children, or you can buy them now, but years ago you couldn't find them, but the I Spy pillows, where you would, you can find them where there's rice in these little cloth pillows with like a kind of a screen, and they're able to find certain things in there, little treasures in there. It makes it exciting. And, it's, if you prepare before and you get yourself kind of your activity bag ready, your snack bag ready, and know what's going to, you have your CDs ready. I remember earlier, I make sure all my downloads are ready, to go. That's what brings the ease in. So you're able to have a really relaxing, fun, great trip. And I really like what you said about the rhythm and being open and flexible to that because of the rhythm. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes your child might be feeling out of sorts because they're out of their place. And so you need to support that. And you kind of have to let your plan go for a moment, and being aware of that and just focus on that, because that's what's important. If you get to your destination and your child is not feeling resolved because of what, you were like going, then that's going to cause you more suffering, more work at the end at your destination.
Yeah. And we always need to be looking at things from the child's perspective. I mean, car seats are not comfortable. So obviously trying to get the most comfortable car seat that you can, because I mean, think of it as an adult having to be strapped in the same position. And, now children are in car seats so much longer. On an airplane, of course, up to the age of 2, they're sitting on your lap, or then after that, they're in their own seat. And so, they might be hungry, they might be tired, they might be cranky, the boredom, the this, the that. And so kind of looking at what are their needs and really trying to address that. I wanted to talk about the airplane travel though, because, well, a car as well. And, both of us are not advocates of screen time for children. And so when I think about an airplane, I mean, this is such an incredible adventure. I watch my grandsons as they travel, and one of them, like he loves to talk to the flight attendants, and he's gotten invited up into the cockpit, and he has his little wings that the airline has given him. And he has to put those wings on when he flies because it's such a big deal. And I mean, just the novelty of getting on an airplane and staring out the window and takeoff and landing and flight attendants coming by and, getting some juice in a cup. And there's so much that's exciting about it. And so when we plug our children in, we're depriving them of all of these experiences that they might not be paying attention to. And I fly quite a bit these days, and I usually have my window open and I'm staring out because I love the marvel of flying. And so, children, they're intrinsically excited about all of that. And so really letting them engage in that to their fullest. And of course, there are going to be passengers who are not thrilled with small children on the plane. And that's tough. You have children, and people just have to be okay with that. And obviously we want to try to make our children as comfortable as possible so that they're content and relaxed and not fussing. But when they do start to fuss, knowing that that's just a part of childhood as well. I do bring my essential oils along on the planes. And I think, for protection as well as for calming, those can be really, really helpful for all of us. And just engaging a flight attendant up front, getting them sort of on your side and asking for what you may need ahead of time, I think can really be important as well.
Yeah. I love that tip about the essential oils. I think essential oils have saved us in traveling for sure.
Yeah.
Even just the hand sanitizer.
Hand sanitizer. And then calming. And then, of course, if, upset tummies or car sickness, peppermint, fennel, those can be so helpful. And so, looking at all of the different ways in which we can engage the children. But again, it comes down to that focus with them, that intention with them. If we are paying attention to our children, if we're watching their cues, if we're seeing what's up, we can prevent a lot of the meltdowns that happen. And then when those meltdowns happen, of course, we can go there as well.
When you travel with children, you have to be a conscious parent. If you want this to pay off, you need to pay attention and lean in when you need to and lean out when you need to, and just let it go, because it can be a traumatic thing. All this new stimuli coming in, it is overwhelming. So how can you prepare for that? Another tip I would recommend is rescue remedy.
Yeah.
The Bach flower remedies, to making sure that you have that on hand for mama first, and then if you can for the child.
Yeah, that mama first is a good point. When you're traveling on an airplane, they always say put the oxygen mask on ourselves first. So are we well rested? Are we well fed? Are we taken care of? So that we have that patience, because inevitably with traveling with children, something is going to come up and our children are going to have needs that are a little more vocal, or they might be having a meltdown. And so then we need to be at the hopefully rested place. But, then those other things happen, plane cancellations, long waits, delays, lines, this and that. And so, when we're able to address that with a little bit of grace and humor, that's going to go far. And of course, our children are going to be picking up on all of that as well. When we're stressed out, they're picking up on that. So we want to try to stay as calm as possible. But it's such an adventure.
Yeah, I think we both highly recommend, getting out there, traveling, whether it's in an airplane to see family and friends, or, getting camping an hour away. Start, when you want to start camping, I think we should have a podcast separately just on like outdoor travel, outdoor adventure. And then there's the flying adventures. And then there's those European adventures and worldly experiences, adventures like the Jeffries family who has done that. And, like when my sister has three children, and when they were smaller, she took all three to Europe, and how do you do that when they're that age? How do you navigate Europe with three toddlers?
Right. I think those kinds of trips, you can do it with younger children. I know lots of people who do. We kind of waited till our kids were old enough to carry their own backpacks.
Right.
And I think they were 8 and 10 the first European vacation. And it was fantastic. They loved every minute of it. They were completely content. They were ready for the adventure. They were very responsible about it. I don't think we had, I'm thinking back on it. Maybe I'm romanticizing it, but it was just really fulfilling for everybody. I think our daughter got sick at one point, but we managed to get through that too. I wanted to two other things kind of came to mind while you were talking. Water, when you can have access to water. Obviously, if it's the summertime and you can stop at creeks or swimming pools, or if you're staying in a motel or hotel that has a pool, the water really is important for kids to get into as much as possible. And so if it's wintertime, sometimes there's those indoor pools or hot springs. You were talking about the hot springs, even just a bath at the end of the day, those kinds of things. And then the other thing that I know both you and I have taken advantage of is the state park and national park gift shops always have fabulous curriculum. So when you're traveling, take advantage of those wonderful books about the places that you're traveling in. And so when we were reading as a family, I think we've talked about this before, but we would be reading a book about the area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that really it connects them, and it makes sense for them. Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and we've done that with like historical fiction, and then the visitor centers have so much information that you can use for curriculum and use for just learning that involves, and like you said, busy hands, busy minds, and so many of those places, and we're talking like kind of more 6, 7 years old, but they do junior ranger programs and stuff like that are just invaluable.
Right. And preparing our children ahead of time. One of my favorite stories was when we did go to Scandinavia. That was that first European trip, and the kids had learned the Norse mythology before we went. And we were in the middle of Stockholm, and we were walking around with one of my husband's cousins that we had never met before. And we got to a place where there was this enormous fountain, and our children recognized what that fountain was from one of the Norse myths. And they were saying, look, that's in, I can't remember what it was. Was it Odin and something? And they were so excited about that. And I remember my husband's cousin just marveling at these American kids that knew these stories, but not, it was so exciting for our children to see that. And then my daughter finding Sacagawea's statue in Portland. And so those things are huge.
Yeah. I love it. Well, I think we could talk forever on this, and I think we will continue, but I think we've given a lot for people to chew on, to think about, and, and it's go adventure. Your children want it.
They sure do. So until next time, take care. We'll see you on The Moms I Know.
Thanks for joining us today for The Moms I Know. To learn more about Sheila and her online program, The Mom Map, visit purplebeetnutrition.com. For Maria's monthly blog and to learn more about her group programs and retreats, visit soquelessentials.com. That's SOQUEL essentials.com. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Moms I Know. Until next week, have a joyful family journey.